Switching positions can be tough, but it could be one of the most important decisions you make in your baseball career. Here's how I did it and how you can too. First off, my name is Evan Mendoza, and I'm quite literally that guy that talks baseball development, mindset, and even recruiting. I committed to NC State as a two-way, but I really found myself in the starting rotation my freshman year. And after struggling on the mound, I converted to a third baseman my sophomore year. Got drafted my junior year, and the rest is history. Stay until the end, and I'll show you how I did it. Also, make sure to go down below in the description to download our free 27-page blueprint, where I give away everything we teach our students inside my triple play. All right, so first and foremost, I converted from a right-handed pitcher my freshman year of college into an infielder. And this was probably one of the single most memorable and best decisions I ever made in my entire baseball career. If I continued to be a pitcher throwing mid to upper 80s, I probably wouldn't have gotten drafted to a professional team like the St. Louis Cardinals or ever eventually play for the San Diego Padres. I worked extremely hard, which is what I'm going to share with you in this video, on how I made that transition to become an infielder. All right, so let's get started. Let's talk about what really happened, okay? I went from having under a 1 ERA my senior year of high school. I think it was maybe even really close to 0.5 ERA, right? So I was dominant on the mound. I committed to NC State as a two-way, but my freshman year at NC State in the ACC, I found myself in the starting rotation. I was the Saturday starter, meaning I was the second best pitcher that NC State had on the pitching staff, which I thought was pretty cool. It was my freshman year. And my first ever start which was against Davidson. I went 5 innings. It was a quality start. I think I struck out a few. I gave up a solo home run, but I got my first ever collegiate win. And I thought that was so amazing. My parents were there, and it was, I believe, on Valentine's Day. So it was a pretty cool present to them. Fast forward my second outing against Coastal Carolina, I didn't make it out of the first inning. I walked the house, and basically ever since that moment, I never was able to really get into the swing of things. So looking back, I got an 8 ERA, right? So what exactly happened there? I'm about to share it with you. And I also went from constantly throwing around 90 miles an hour the fall of my freshman year during inter-squad scrimmages, and even topping 90 on my first ever start in college, to my second start against Coastal Carolina, where I had a lot of struggles finding the zone. I think my first pitch was 84, and then I was sitting like 81 to 82. So what happened, right? Again, I'm going to share with you exactly what happened, and this is a lesson that I really wish that a lot of people learn sooner rather than later, and if anything, you learn through my failures. That's the reason why I'm doing all of this social media, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all of it, right? Because I want to share those experiences with you and your player. Well, what happened in between really my first ever collegiate start and my second one was my pitching coach, basically telling me, hey, you could probably get drafted in a couple years if you just increase your velocity. I was more of a command guy, throwing around 85 to 87, right? So I knew what my pitches were doing. I could locate all 3 of my pitches, but he thought it was a good idea to start doing a plyo ball throwing program starting the very first weekend right after my first collegiate win. And I was, excited. I was still celebrating my first ever start, and I was high hopes. I was like, okay, I want to start throwing like 95. That would be awesome. I think I could get drafted in like the top 3 rounds if that happens, right? I'm already a freshman. I'm already in the rotation. Let's keep growing. Let's keep throwing harder, right? So I started doing those plyo ball throwing programs, and I remember the first ever day I did it, I was throwing as hard as I possibly could against a brick wall with, I think it was like a 1 ounce or maybe even a 2 ounce ball. So I was throwing that thing very fast, and I heard a pop in my elbow, and it didn't feel good. So that pain kind of just like lingered all the way up until my second start against Coastal Carolina. And that's why I only topped out at really like 84, I believe maybe 85, but I was sitting like 81, 82. The fastest pitch that I had that entire game was the first fastball I threw of the game. So what exactly happened? It was me just not really understanding to the fullest extent of what really was going on. So we move forward to the University of Miami. And this is where I was kind of in the bullpen. I wasn't playing a ton, and we were taking batting practice. All right. And this is a fun story because I was shagging right here in right field. So I was shagging in right field right here. That's me in the green. And our star senior outfielder was shagging right here. Cool? And if you guys don't know how BP works, but usually the starters are going to have priority of tracking balls, especially the outfielders. Well, me being an athlete, me wanting to be active, me being in the in the dugout sometimes watching the game, me in the bullpen, just not really being able to express my athleticism, I took shagging outfield fly balls like very, very seriously. So I started tracking this ball in right center. I started going that way. Well, the center fielder did the same exact thing. He started going that way. And that's where we collided. And basically, we almost had an injury, right? We hit each other. He was looking at me like, dude, freshman, get out of the way, right? And then also, our coaching staff started yelling at me. They're like, dude, Mendy, what are you doing? Lesson learned, that's for sure. But this all happened technically during spring break. We had like 5-6 days that we went down to South Florida, played against Florida Atlantic in Boca Raton, and then we had a 3-game series against University of Miami on the weekend. So I just remember being at the University of Miami and being like, I am so tired of just sitting in the bullpen, right? So I want to be active. And right after that happened, the coaching staff basically yelled at me and said, hey, Mendy, come into the infield. So I jogged my way over here to shortstop, and I asked for some fungos, right? Some ground balls, and that was just my way of just staying active. And I will never forget that session of ground balls. I had so much fun. I literally had so much fun. I was enjoying the ground balls that were being hit to me, the fungos, and I was just like, man, this is fun. I'm able to be active, and this is exciting for me in my career, right? So I believe it was like we were on group 3 at the time, and we usually have 4 groups of BP. So after group 3, I basically jogged over here to, I believe it was Chris Hart, our assistant coach and also recruiting coordinator. I said, hey, Coach Hart, do you mind if I take BP? He goes, dude, absolutely not. Go for it. Do it, man. And he understood I got committed as a two-way, and he also understood during the fall scrimmages and preseason scrimmages against our own team, we would have like red and black World Series and fun things like that. I hit really good. I believe I probably hit around like 300 as a freshman. So he was like, yeah, dude, like you've shown that you can kind of do it. Like, don't give up on it kind of thing. But he never really guided me on like, hey, you should hit BP or you shouldn't. That was more on me. I take full responsibility on that because I did show signs of promise to be a starting pitcher, right? Especially early in the season. This was maybe 3 or 4 weeks into the season, right? So ever since that moment, I started working extremely hard. And this is a post that I did back then in college. And this was our cage, right? This was just me hitting off of a tee. But it's going to be kind of hard for you guys to see. But over here in that cage, there would be an automatic machine. There would be a little cylinder, rotating balls. You would fill it up, and then it would automatically be shot into the 3-wheel machine. I would crank that thing up to 90, 95 miles an hour, really challenge myself. And the thing that I really want you guys to understand, I would hit, and probably the coolest part about this, we would have Bluetooth, listen to some music really, really loud, but I would literally enjoy hitting by myself in the shadows, right? I actually took a lot of pride in it because I knew it was going to pay off one day. And I would hit sometimes because I was bored from like 10 p.m. all the way until like 1 a.m. just because I was like, this is going to pay off one day. I know for a fact it's going to pay off. And then also sometimes we would have early morning conditioning at like 6 a.m. We would be done at like 6:30, and maybe I'd have like an 8 a.m. class. So I would get some breakfast real quick, and from like 7 to 8, maybe I would have like an 8:30 a.m. I would hit in the cage because I was like, I'm going to be as productive as humanly possible, and I know later in the day I'm going to have some studying, I might have some homework, and I might not necessarily feel like it, right? Everyone has those thoughts. So these were the times where I really just put myself out there and really just grinded. I would even take short hops off the machine, just crank that 3 machine down so it's shooting off in short hops. It would be a way that I would break in new gloves. I would also just do curveballs. I'd work on lefty righty curveballs. I'd be a master with that 3-wheel machine, right? Because I was in that machine, in that cage, it felt like a lot more than anyone else. And that's something that I feel very confident in, that I outworked just about every single player on that team. Very confident in saying that. Because I was constantly in the cage past midnight. And I remember I would be by myself. Sometimes if I went a little bit earlier, around like 9 p.m., there'd be some guys like wrapping up, right? And I was like, okay, well, my day is just getting started, right? And there would also be times at midnight where someone knocks on the door and I open it up and I see, Chris Hart or Elliot Avent pop his head in. He's like, why is the music so loud? It sounds like, you can't even hear the bat hitting the ball using metal bats. I'm like, oh, sorry. Like, do you want me to, turn it down or whatever? But either way, like, I think that impressed them because obviously it wasn't just one time that they saw me doing that, but it was multiple times throughout the week for many, many months and basically throughout my entire freshman year and especially my sophomore year. I was praised sometimes by Coach Avent, and I told him politely, especially my sophomore year before I got that playing time, I said, hey, don't praise me because you're not necessarily rewarding me for that hard work, and I know for a fact I can perform out there in front of the ACC competition as a third baseman, as a hitter. And I've been working hard. And I think that's something that, I did have those conversations with Coach Avent, Coach Hart, and I said, like, I know I can do this. I believe in myself. And they gave me an opportunity and I absolutely ran with it, okay? So let's talk about real quick what that process looks like as far as changing positions. Because for me, it really came down to a couple of steps. And without these steps, it was going to be really hard for me to make that transition, right? So step number one, you really have to decide and go full force into one direction, right? And I always say, if you can be a two-way, be a two-way for as long as possible. Obviously, Ohtani's doing great things, but if you are capable to perform at a high level, do both for as long as humanly possible. Trust me, that is going to give you many more opportunities than you could have ever imagined. So number one, if you are in this dilemma where you feel like if you devote all of your time towards one position over another, and that's something that maybe the college coaching staff or even high school coaching staff is talking about and discussing, if you feel like you're in a position to really just gravitate towards one, do that and go full force into it. And also, another thing that I actually kind of did was, I know a lot of people like talking about manifestation nowadays, but that's something that I truly did. I used to tell some of the volunteer coaches, I said, hey, next year I'm going to be that starting shortstop. I'm going to be that starting third baseman because I know for a fact I'm going to be working harder than anyone else, and I'm going to be, playing over a senior. Talk about how crazy that is, right? A lot of people that I, speak on calls with, they'll tell me, hey, I'm just a sophomore and obviously I'm not going to play because there's a senior in front of me. Well, that's exactly what happened for me my sophomore year. I played over a third baseman that was a senior. It was his last year, and he got very limited playing time because I outworked him, plain and simple. So what's your excuse if your son is a sophomore and there's a senior in front, right? So keep that in mind. So step number one is really just to decide on what you want to do in your journey. Step number two is really to learn the new skill, right? Because you haven't been putting all efforts into that one specific skill, whether it's pitching or playing the outfield or playing the infield or catching or whatever it may be. So now you're going to be kind of learning the new way of that position. So that's going to be the next step, is really just to full on just learn the new position, learn the new perspective, because that's going to help you out so much. After we learn, this is when we're ultimately going to be growing, right? Growing within that position, whether it's as an infielder or as a pitcher. We're going to grow from our mistakes, grow from our successes, learn again from everything, right? Viewing everything as more of a growth mindset rather than looking at all the failures and thinking, why is this all happening, right? You should be excited about failure because every failure means you're going to be one step closer to succeeding, all right? So after we grow, now this is probably the most important, but a lot of people want this last step right away, right? And this is the final success, right? You're going to find that success if you work hard, if you have the right mindset. Those both blend together and you have the right, coaching staff, support system around you to make that transition. For me personally, all I needed was an automatic machine and a coaching staff that truly cared about me. Because if I went to a Power 5 school, a Florida State, a UF, they probably wouldn't have given me that second chance to actually transition into a third baseman. Obviously, it took a lot of hard work, and it also took some trust that the college coaching staff at NC State trusted in me. And I think that was shown through the hard work and countless hours that I was putting in by myself in the cage. Now, I really want to just hit on what that payoff really looked like for me transitioning from a pitcher into a third baseman for my sophomore season. I hit 362, by the way, which was an unbelievable stat. I was second team all ACC. And then my junior year, I took a little bit of a dip. I hit around like 270, but with much more power, many more home runs, and more doubles, right? So before, I was pitching once a week, right? And as you guys already know, like I was a little bit of that like ADHD where like I just have to be active. I was always just an active player. I want to have that energy of just playing, practicing. And for me, it was kind of hard because if I'm a pitcher, right, like you have bullpens, right? And besides bullpens, like how much harder can you actually work? Yes, you can get after it in the gym, which I would definitely do my freshman year, right? But you can't necessarily throw like, 7 days a week, right? Off of a bullpen, right? Bullpen, 100%. You can't do that because like obviously you have to take care of your arm. If I did that, my arm would have been in much more pain than what it was my freshman year when I heard that pop, right? So this was something that I was having a hard time with, right? When I was a pitcher, especially in the bullpen, I would do my band work, I would do my arm care work, I would do bullpens a couple of times throughout the week, I'd do some touch and feel, I'd do long toss, right? All those things are pretty standardized, but then I had a hard time like when it was midnight. What do I do? Can I really throw a bullpen by myself? Yes, and that's something I did do, but I told myself like to kind of put that governor on, right? I didn't want to ever throw 100% because I was like, well, I have a bullpen tomorrow, but I know I'm active. I know I want to be active. And that was something that was really challenging for me, right? So also before, I also had an 8 ERA, right? Not super fun. I didn't only pitch once a week, but I only played really once a week. I was also, on the bench watching baseball, right? And it's definitely fun to be part of the environment in college watching baseball. But at a certain point in time, actually my sophomore year, they were actually experimenting with me being a catcher. So what I went ahead and did, I was actually catching bullpens. Because I was just so active and I did not want to watch any more baseball. I was like, at the very least, I get to actually practice my receiving skills, my framing skills. And this actually happened for like 3 months, 2 months probably leading up to my sophomore year season when I was working extremely hard just for a spot in the lineup. And then like a month into this season, we actually were kind of frustrated with each other, the coaching staff and myself, because they wanted me to like, I don't know, I think it was like a pinch run and I was down in the bullpen. And they said, "Hey, Mendy, why aren't you in the dugout? You should be in the dugout." I said, "Hey, well, I'm not playing. I'd much rather actually practice something like my receiving skills during the game." And I don't think they really liked that. But at the end of the day, that's me being active, me wanting to play, me having that desire to play. And I hate to break it to you, but it wasn't my parents pushing me. It wasn't, my teammates pushing me or my coaches pushing me. And I think that's truly what was the separator in, Elliot Avent, if you ever, come across him and ask about me, he always likes to say that he loves the story that I was able to create for myself by transitioning from a pitcher to a third baseman, all the hard work that I put in. He really appreciated that. So that's, I think, where that trust kind of came in. But after I was able to play like 5 times a week, it was easy for me to do extra work, right? Like in the cage. Easy, just swing it out, right? If I ever felt frustrated about anything, I would just go to the cage and just swing for a couple of hours, listen to some good music. I was also hitting 362 average, second team all ACC. A ton of rewards. I forgot the actual award that I was like a semifinalist for, but I was basically just I broke out onto the scene. No one knew who I was. My freshman year, I had 3 at bats. I was 0 for 3 against University of Virginia. I started the second game of a doubleheader. I struck out twice, and I think I grounded out to the first baseman. So I was 0 for 3. I had a 0.00 average my freshman year, and then I turned into a 362 average my sophomore year, which really was the year that helped get me drafted by the St. Louis Cardinals, and then later play with the San Diego Padres throughout my 7-year pro career. So, obviously the payoff was huge. It was so exciting to be able to see, the player that I turned into, and then really the hard work that I had to put in to develop that trust with my coaching staff. There were times of frustration. There was times also when I believed truly I had what it took and I had those conversations, but I didn't have those conversations before I put in the work. and before the coaching staff knew how hard I was working. I did that and I was quiet. I kept my mouth shut. I also was looking down and just working hard for countless months, right? Probably like closer to 7 to 11 months. And then finally, when I felt like it was the right time, I said, hey guys, like you're bragging to the team that I'm working so hard, but you're not giving me a cookie, right? You're not giving me a time to actually show that hard work out there on the field when it actually truly matters. So when they actually, heard me say that, I think that was like, a light bulb moment for them, because the next day they did give me that starting spot at third base, and I went 3 for 4. And then the next day I went 3 for 4 again. And then the next day I think I went 2 for 4. And then the next day, I think it was my 4th game starting as a third baseman. I believe it was against UNCW. I think I went 4 for 4 with my first ever big field home run. I never hit a big field home run my entire high school career, and it was all the way up until my sophomore year of college where I hit my first ever home run. And it was, a very alarming moment. And I think after like a month of playing time, early in the season, probably like middle of March, I looked at the scoreboard one time and I was in shock. I think I was hitting like 600, which is just unheard of, obviously. But that all came by through the consistent hard work that I was doing leading up to that season. And I truly believed that that work was going to pay off, because I always have that mindset that champions are made in the off season. If you guys think that, getting on some type of program in the middle of your high school baseball career or high school baseball season or your son's high school season, it's going to be a little bit too late, because there's going to be a lot of moving pieces, right? You obviously are trying to deal with the successes and performing out there on the field, but obviously the development and making sure that we're maintaining our muscles, growing in the gym athletically. Those are going to be huge areas that we also focus on. So champions are truly made in the offseason. I think that this really encapsulates that mindset that I had throughout my high school baseball career, also transitioning into college, and then, obviously figuring out how I was as a player my sophomore year, and to be able to showcase my skills and just ultimately show out for all the scouts that were watching, all the area scouts, regional scouts, area cross checkers, all that fun stuff. That's truly where I made a name for myself. And I'm, so happy that I made that transition, because again, if it wasn't for that transition and if it wasn't for my elbow popping, right, none of this would have, come true for me. My dreams wouldn't have come true. I wouldn't have been able to play alongside guys like Machado, Tatis, Albert Pujols, and, Yadier Molina, Paul Goldschmidt. Those were some of the best memories throughout my entire baseball career. Truly, were my 3 years at NC State, where I was grinding, I was working hard, and ultimately I played scared, and that's okay to do, because when I played scared, I was scared of failure. I was scared to mess up, because I knew I had a short leash. And Coach Elliott Avent, I'll never forget, he asked me to bunt my first ever at bat when I'm hitting around 500, and I didn't get it down, and he pulled me out of the game, right? I did play scared. It worked for me. It might not work for you, but I also put in so much time and energy and effort where I was scared, because I wanted that time that I was putting in and investing in my career to show out in a very, very meaningful way. Now, if your player is a high school baseball player and he's looking to turn into a college prospect, go down below and schedule a call with me to learn how we can implement the triple play system for your player.